Picture March 2020. I remember where I was, in a group fitness class at the gym, and midway through class, we got the infamous email from Northeastern saying that classes were canceled for the time being. When I was on my way home later that evening, I stopped by Whole Foods, only to see panicked shoppers emptying the shelves. I grabbed the last can of beans I could find. Little did I know that that week would turn into 2 whole years of living through a pandemic.
When Winnie and I lived in Boston together, she was just a 10-minute walk away from me. Strolling down Boston, I'd see people shopping at the Prudential Center or grabbing a drink at one of the local Irish bars. One day, I couldn't do that anymore. I was told to stay home indefinitely. Boston instantly became a ghost town. Boylston was empty, and I couldn't just step outside to visit my sister. Before I realized what was going on, the world shut down, and I, like many others, was thrown into a socially isolated world.
In the next few days, I woke up to messages and calls from my friends asking me for cooking tips, recipes, or even how to use up the tiniest amount of a specific ingredient. Who knew you could make chickpeas 3 different ways in 1 week, or that mustard lasts forever in the fridge, and eggs are good way beyond their expiration date? Before the pandemic started, cooking with my friends was one of my favorite things to do. Cooking with Karen was also a huge part of our lives growing up. We would experiment with baking complicated desserts, or making Western food when we got tired of the traditional Chinese food our family made. So, in a time when the pandemic threw me into a period of uncertainty, cooking quickly became one of the only constants in my life. I realized that it was finally time to start a food Instagram account dedicated to documenting the variety of food I was making and to stay connected.
On the second day of the pandemic, Winnie asked me to join her in starting this food Instagram. I immediately said yes and was so excited to share recipes and helpful cooking tips with others. The next thing I know, we were frantically texting each other, trying to come up with clever names to combine quarantine and eating for our Instagram. We were furiously texting, typing out recipes that we could make.
And on the 3rd day of the pandemic, Quaraneat was born. Our motto was 2 sisters, good food, and no friends to share it with.
Suddenly, I was stockpiling yeast, flour, beans, and Purell in my pantry.
My windowsill was lined with every single herb I could try to regrow. I had scallion roots in jars, lined up next to each other like Russian dolls by my window. Even though we were physically isolated, sharing recipes on Instagram made us feel connected to the people in our lives. As we kept posting recipes and step-by-step videos, we realized that despite our physical isolation and separate livelihoods, we were all going through similar experiences brought on by the pandemic.
Who remembers waiting for their bananas to ripen? Well, they say a watched pot never boils, and I quickly realized that watching over my bananas doesn't make them ripen any faster either. One of our most successful recipes, which also got our first repost on New York Times Cooking, was our banana bread, now known as the iconic pandemic banana bread. It was successful not only because was it an easy recipe to make, but also because everyone was quarantined in their house and limited by their trips to the grocery store. We were all using Zoom for the first time, rationing out toilet paper, and wistfully waiting for life to return and our bananas to ripen.
It was such a great feeling to see how many people tagged us in their stories of their banana bread, which we got to reshare onto our own account. There were so many reposts that we started compiling them into a highlight of fan love. Even though we were virtual, we could still feel the energy and excitement through social media.
It was incredible to feel the small pockets of impact we had on people's lives, whether it was a DM or a fire emoji react to our story. For example, for those who had never cooked prior to the pandemic, we were able to teach basic cooking skills and share creative ways to keep lunch meals fresh while the whole 5 days a week, 8 hours on Zoom calls were quickly getting stale, like my bread. It was unique, feeling so virtually close to people, yet so physically far at the same time.
Our community was growing so rapidly and organically through our friends who were sharing our account with their friends. We quickly realized that our food Instagram was connecting so many individuals from different social networks into one.
Just as we felt like Quaraneat was connecting individuals together, our personal connection to Quaraneat also began to grow.
When we first started this Instagram, we purposely focused only on the food and didn't put ourselves in front of the video. But as we were building a stronger community, we felt more comfortable sharing our culture and our personal lives on Quaraneat.
We have shown more and more glimpses into our family life, such as our two precious grandmas cooking for our family, who are here today with us, and our dad making his secret French fry recipe with his not-so-secret novelty toy, the air fryer.
It has been an incredible journey building a community, one that we're proud of, and one that came out of a socially and physically isolated world. Since we started our food Instagram at the start of the pandemic, we have raised over $14,000 in support for various organizations that we're passionate about. We hadn't realized it at the time, but the community that we had built around Quaraneat was one based on shared values.
Our first fundraiser during COVID was inspired by our mom, who was a nurse practitioner. There were days when she worked the front lines of the pandemic to take care of her patients. When she got home, she went straight to her bedroom, unable to even see her family. Trying to minimize contact, our dad would slip a meal tray through her door for dinner.
Looking up to our mom and admiring her bravery, we were motivated to do something more. We became inspired to host our first fundraiser for Off Their Plate, an organization that provided meals to healthcare workers in hospitals during COVID. Using Instagram stories and filling up one bingo board at a time, we raised over $2,000 in a matter of days, with just over 500 followers on our account.
We were in awe of the support that came from our followers. We had become more than just a food account to share recipes during quarantine. We were evolving into a community of individuals that work together for a greater cause.
Just as we started to feel closer to our Quaraneat community, things turned personal at the start of last year, which also was around the time of Chinese New Year.
Across the country, there was a surge of hate crimes against Asian Americans, many of which were targeted towards the elderly in response to frustrations related to COVID-19. It disheartened us greatly when we saw how many people of Asian descent were being provoked and targeted in broad daylight for their race.
It reminded us that at any given moment, that individual could be one of our own family members, our grandmas, or even ourselves. When Antoni Porofsky, as many of you might know from the hit TV show Queer Eye, proposed to do an Instagram live cooking show with us, we felt compelled to use our voices. Together, we were able to reach a wider audience and raise awareness and advocate for Stop AAPI Hate, and make scallion pancakes with Antoni.
Beyond the fact that we had hosted another successful fundraiser for Stop AAPI Hate, this cause was also deeply personal. For a large part of my life, I felt ashamed for being Asian American, struggling to bridge two of my worlds together. When I was younger, there was a time when I never invited my friends over in fear of the food that they wouldn't like what I ate and how my grandmas didn't speak English. I was scared I would be disliked for who I was. It was so meaningful to share snippets of my family and culture, aspects that are so personal to my life, and to integrate them with our passion for food. It has been a challenging journey coming to terms and being proud of who I am. But it made me realize that for those who also come from multicultural experiences and backgrounds, it is so important to embrace your uniqueness and to share it with others.
Through Quaraneat, we've been able to use our voices to raise awareness for AAPI hate. What started as a food account became a vessel to engage our community. We are constantly reminded to be advocates for what we believe in and to encourage others to do so as well. So you may be wondering, why? What drives us to keep going?
It's simply that we are passionate about people. Being physically isolated from each other is not normal. We, as human beings, are hungry for human connection, whether it's through conversation or physical touch. As life resumed and we adapted to a new normal, we have been reminded of how special human connection is.
Since my freshman year at Northeastern, I've been volunteering at a local organization called Haley House. Through early morning shifts at the soup kitchen, afternoons distributing food pantry groceries to Asian elders, to evenings supporting cooking classes for teens, I felt a sense of community there like no other. Food was what united us all, not only because it's a common necessity, but because it held these precious communities together. I was deeply inspired by the mission of Haley House, which is centered around food with purpose and fostering an intentional community. That's what we've been trying to embody with Quaraneat, as it's not always just about the food, but it's about the people and the impact it can have and on bringing people together to create even greater changes.
For me, I volunteered at God's Love We Deliver in New York this past summer. This organization prepares and delivers meals for individuals living with long-term illnesses. Every week, I'd wake up at 5 a.m. and bike 30 blocks downtown on 2nd Avenue when the city was still sleeping and the sky was still pink with the sun barely peeking through. Then, for 3 hours, I chopped tomatoes or scooped peas. One week, I was stuck chopping onions, and I've never cried more in my life. However, no matter how mundane the task was at hand, I found myself returning every week. This was because I had found incredible people to work with, individuals who are also passionate about service and caring for others.
It was these special personal connections and the sense of community that we found working in these kitchens and serving others that inspired us to host our most recent fundraiser in support of these organizations, where we wrote our own cookbook featuring our own special family recipes.
When we started Quaraneat, it was just the two of us. But it was never just the two of us. Growing up, the resounding dinner time call from our parents brought us together to the evening table, around the table each evening. Food has also simply been a way, or some could say excuse even, to bring our friends together, whether it's over a whole roasted chicken or a slice of cake.
With Quaraneat, we've been able to create a community during a time where we couldn't even see, hug, or even be with each other.
So, what has our Quaraneat journey taught us?
Even when you might feel like you're alone, you're not. In this ever-evolving isolated life, you can spend hours at a time scrolling on your phone, or even go eat at an automated restaurant without interacting with anyone. But we can't afford to lose sight of what makes us the most resilient: our humanity and the power of social connection.
Look around you. No matter what you're passionate about, there's someone who's also passionate about it as well. You have the ability to tap into the people and networks around you.
Take our story for an example. Food has always been a big part of our lives. In a time of uncertainty, by using food as a reminder of home, comfort, friends, and culture, we were able to evolve Quaraneat and amplify our voices in our community.
You may not realize it just yet, but your potential to create and empower is also right at your fingertips. By building connections, one at a time, we hold the power to create communities and invoke real action.
Take a moment to reflect on the resilience and the empathy that you've seen since the pandemic started.
Since the isolating days we've spent alone, there have been so many new pockets of communities that have come together to fight social injustices or to even find new friends to share experiences with.
We've been so lucky thus far with the unexpected success of Quaraneat. What started as a food account where we shared recipes and bonded over common kitchen struggles has turned into so much more.
Quaraneat has expanded from our friends to their friends to friends of friends, and finally into this larger community where we've been able to make a real impact on real people. While there's no one recipe for success, the key ingredient for success is found in yourself and those around you.
We can't wait to see what you cook next.
Thank you.